Why, hello there! In this episode, we are gonna cover CSS Grid. And this is a topic I've been avoiding for far too long, so we're gonna learn it. But you might be like, hey Ed, I already know Flexbox. Listen to me. You are underestimating the power of the grid. Now don't worry if you don't know CSS Grid, I'm going to cover all the useful properties that you can use in your websites. But if you've been to Prism before, then you're probably familiar with it. Actually, I'm stupid. Those are bars, not grids. I'm fucking stupid. And before we actually get started, let me know down in the comments if you use CSS Grid. Personally, I use Flexbox and Grid together because I think I can get the most power out of it that way. So stretch a bit, pop your neck, and let's get gridding. Now before we actually get going, I want you to know that we can use Flexbox for a lot of things. So for example, if I have a nav bar like so, this is a very simple layout. It's in one direction, so from left to right. Okay, there's no need for CSS Grid in here. So I might have a logo or something here, logo, and I'm gonna change the font a bit so you can see. Like that, and maybe I have a burger menu, so I'm just gonna make a rectangle for now, like so, and give it a darker color. So in this case here, you can align everything in the center, you can add a space around or whatever you want, and you are pretty much done with it. So for this example, it's very simple. And again, if I want to go this way, maybe I want to create a box where I have a title and some text, it's kind of gonna work the same way. So we can just adjust this. Now the problem that that Flexbox has is when you want to create a more complex layout. So maybe I want to have this is a big parent that I have for this example, and maybe I want to have a section here, and then I'm going to change this color to like a reddish, and I'm going to stretch it kind of to the center, and then maybe I want to have another one here like so. So this would be another div on my page. I'm gonna give this a greenish color. And then down here, maybe I wanna have a bigger one that stretches all the way. Well, this is getting a bit more complex than what we had. So here we would probably have to add an extra div around these two just to kind of make this work, right? Because by default, we would have these three boxes like so. If we would have the one big div, and we would add them, we would have this kind of layout. But if we take everything here and display it flex, everything would go like this, right? So we're kind of having issues. So what we would do is we would add another div over these two, like so, and I'm just gonna add a stroke over this to make this easily visual. There we go. So we would add another div over these two, and that way we can have them separate, and then we can just drag this over and we can display these two flex. So this div, we can display it flex, and this would jump over here, and then we can stretch this out here. So again, or maybe I want to have something like this, then it gets even more complex. So maybe I want this to be stretched down like so. Well, then we would have to, again, just kind of mess around and add extra divs without us wanting to. However, with Grid, we don't have to worry about adding those extra divs and any of that. So let's kind of jump in and get started. So what I have here is just a main tag and just three divs. So these three boxes, kind of what I illustrated in our Figma design. And actually I'm going to open this up with Firefox, because with that we can easily visualize. Not now, Firefox, why you do this to me? We can easily visualize the grid. So I'm gonna paste it in here, and there we go. So again, let me just go back here. We just have three divs in this main tag with a H1. And let's go to our style.css. Again, I just added a background color to them. And I'm gonna get the main tag here, and we're gonna add a display grid to this. So again, by default, your content is gonna flow down this way, so in a column. If we add display grid, nothing's gonna, you're not gonna see anything really happening here. If I press F12 in here, we're gonna get this bar, which you cannot see from my face. I'm gonna fly over here and you have an option here to actually turn on the grid. So if you click on the body and you go to the main tag, you click on it and you should be able to see around here. For me, it pops up apparently. And if we click on this overlay grid, we're gonna see that grid popping up there. Now, it's a bit difficult to see because we have these background colors on top. So I'm gonna change this to black and hopefully we can see it better. I wish they would make it like so you can increase the the stroke size of this. But essentially we would have now 3 rows here. So 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, there are those small dotted lines around there. So we have our grid, and by default, as you can see, nothing interesting really happens. So let's try to recreate, let's do it this way, the one we had. Like so. Okay, let's try to recreate this one. And we kind of have the same colors there as well, so it's perfect. So what we would do is we would have, well, the way grid works basically is you have rows and columns. Now, what are rows? Well, rows are these. Let me just grab a tool here, the line tool, so I can drag lines. Wow. So a line would be this. Not a line, a row would be this. So from here down to here is 1 row. From here down to here are 2 rows. So for this specific layout, we would need 1 and 2 rows. Now, columns are in horizontal. So for that, we would need 1 and 2. So let me just draw it. So we would have 1 here. Why do I need to make the stroke again? So we would have 1 from here all the way to here. So again, if we kind of take a look at it, we would have 1 column, 2 columns, 1 row, and 2 rows. So let's create that in CSS grid. So we just added display grid, and now we can define something called grid template columns. And here we just add the amount of pixels we want our columns to have. And the way we can add multiple is just by adding, let's say 300 pixels, that's 1 column, and then we can just write 300 pixels again. That's 2 columns. Hit save. Now if we take a look, we can see that we got 2 columns. Now, as you can see, since we only have 2, the extra content that would not be able to go over here would just go down into another row. So that's the default. If we define 2 here, whatever is extra just goes down here into a generally created row. Now, if we want this to be here, then we just add another column. Let's do 300 pixels. Hit save, and now as you can see, all of them are here. Very nice, very nice. Now the cool thing is we can also use not only pixels, we can use percentages too. So maybe I want this to be 50% of the width of the main. Now if we take a look, as you can see, that's 50% of the main div. Perfect. Now another useful thing we can use is something called fractions. And I keep wanting to say frictions, but it's not frictions, it's fractions. And the way we can do that is we can write 1FR. And that kind of works like flex in whatchamacallit, in Flexbox. So what that does, it kind of stretches all the way, it takes up all the available space that you have on this column. Okay, so it takes up all the space. Now, if I want these to be all equal, then we can just add 1FR to all of them. 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. Hit save, and as you can see now, these are all equal size, even if we make it smaller. Yep, works very nicely. We can add 2FR if we want, hit save. That's just gonna take up double the space that these guys have here. But for now, let's just kind of remake this. Look at those black bars, oh my goodness. Okay, so we just need 2. And the way we can do that is, again, just go back here and we can just write 1FR and 1FR. Good, so we have 2, and now, since, I mean, we could define another row, but in this case, it kind of jumped down here automatically. But let's do it for practice. We can just say grid template rows, and here we can just make 2 of them. We can do like, let's do 300 pixels and 300 pixels. Hit save, and as you can see now, both of my rows are 300 pixels. Perfect. Now if I want this to kind of work with my main here, So if I want to use like FRs, because if I add one FR here, well, it's just going to take up the size of whatever content I have in here. But if I want, I can add a height to this of like 100 VH. And as you can see now, it takes up all the space that it has on the screen. So again, one FR, it's just going to take up 50% and 50% of this 100 that I have here. All right, perfect. So now to stretch this all the way here, we're going to actually take a look at how we can move the content around these small boxes. How can we move them around? So the way we can do them is we can select them. So let's select them. Let's start with our green one. I want this to be stretched all the way here. So we can get the box tree like so, and then we can define something called grid column start. Column, I cannot write anymore, start. All right, perfect. And what do we add here? Well, if we take a look back here, the way we count is like so. So here are my columns. Okay, we have 2, and we start from the lines. So here is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, if we take a look at here in Firefox, let me just turn on the grid again. We can start from 1 here all the way to the left, 2 here, and 3. So I want the grid column start from 1 and the grid column end to 3. Hit save. Let's take a look. And as you can see, it stretches all the way. How simple is that? And even simpler, if you're like me and you don't want to write all these things out, grid column start, grid column end, you can just shorten this to grid column. And you can say 1-3. Hit save, and it's going to work the same way. How cool, how cool. All right, now let's stretch this blue one down here. So the way we can do that is I can just get rid of this for now, hit save, and now this jumps here. Now let's do it with the rows. So we can get the box 2. Now we're not going to work with column now, we're going to work with the row. So I want it from this row all the way down here. So the way we can do that is we can say grid row, not grid column, grid row. I want it from 1 all the way to 3. So we count again, 1, 2, and 3. 1 till 3. Hit save. And as you can see, we have some issues here because the other ones are not defined, and the default is going to make a jump. It's going to make a jump here. So what we need to do is we need to get the box 1 again, like so, and we need to make sure we say that it should be here, which is going to be grid column from 1 to 2. Hit save. Okay, and the grid row should be from 1 to 2 again. Grid row from 1 to 2. Hit save. And as you can see now, everything is fine. So for this one, we need to explicitly say that, hey, our box 1 should be here. Okay, don't make everything else jump around. Because when you have it on auto, it kind of tries to figure out where the next content should go on. So you might need to explicitly write this grid column, grid row on each individual boxes. You can kind of see how it floats around. Perfect. So as you can see, we have made it quite simple, huh? And now here, again, the cool thing is that we can add something more, another one. Let's add 3FR, another FR here. So we have a more complex kind of grid. And now look at this. We can mess around with this in crazy ways and come up with crazy designs. So maybe I want the box 1 to stretch till here. So I would add a grid row from 1, 2 to 3 on box 1. Grid row 1 to 3. Hit save. It stretches all the way here. Perfect. Now we can also bring, let's see, what shall we do here? We can bring the box 2 from here to here. So we would start from, now not from 1, from 2, 3 to 4. So let's do from 3 to 4. Hit save. And then I also have to explicitly define from which column it should start from. So we added a grid row from 3 to 4. So 1, 2, from 3 to 4. Actually, let's start from here. So that would be 1, 2. See, counting can be difficult sometimes. 1 from 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's correct. From 2. I'm gonna show you another cool way we can do this without writing a lot of numbers. So there we go. Now it works. From 2 to 4. Okay, counting skills, superb. And let's get just the 3 stretch from here all the way here. So 1, 2. So from 2 to 3, 4. From 2 to 4. So that would be box 3 from grid column 3 to 4. Hit save. And that's not correct. It's from 2 to 4. Oh my goodness. So as you can see here, you have to count correctly and try to figure out where you are starting from. But look at that. We came out with a pretty interesting looking layout. So that's the very cool thing, that you can very easily customize this the way you want. Now, let's actually, if you don't like this counting thing, which, I mean, trust me, I'm having issues with it sometimes too. Let's just simplify this back again. I'm gonna go back to 1FR and 1FR on the columns and rows. So we start up with this basic one again. And what we can do is we can create something called grid template area. And this kind of works like it's like a visual representation of your grid here. So what I mean by that is you would get the box 1, the box 2, and the box 3, and you would give them a name, okay? And you can give it a name by saying grid area. So here you can write any name you want. I'm gonna say box 1, okay, because it's super simple. Here we can add a grid area of box 2 and a grid area of box 3. So now here in the grid template area, we're gonna add these quotes, and we can kind of make this illustration here. And what I mean by that is the first quotes we add here is gonna represent the first column. And here you can add the content you want. So we can say, I want box 1 here on the first column, and I want box 2 on the second column. And now to go to the next row, we just add another quote. And now what do we want on the second row? I want box 3 and box 3, because I want this to be stretched all the way. So now if we take a look, as you can see, this kind of looks like what we have on the grid. So we have box 1 here, box 2 here, and box 3 stretching all the way. Now watch this. If I want to get rid of this part and I just want box 3 to be from here to here, I can just get rid of this. And if I want to leave an empty space, I can just add a dot. Okay? By adding the dot, we leave empty space. Hit save, and now you can see that we have an empty space. So now what if I want to stretch the box 1 all the way here? Well, we have box 1, okay? And then maybe I want the box 2 to be here, box 2, and box 3. Hit save, and look at that. We have box 1, stretching all the way here. Box 2 is down here, and box 3 is here. So again, like what if I add another row? Hit save, and now, since we have another row, we would have to define another pair of quotes. So box 1, I can have box 2 here. I'm gonna leave empty space here, and I can have empty space and box 3. Hit save, and look at that. We have exactly what we have here. So this one is way more simple. You don't have to count anything. Everything just works the way you want. Now let's get rid of this and simplify it. 1FR. I'm gonna have to get rid of this as well. And I'm just gonna have box 2 here, box 1, box 2, and box 3 stretching all the way down here. Perfect. So we are back to normal business. Okay. Now another cool thing we can do is we can kind of move these elements inside these boxes. So something you would normally do, let's say with Flexbox. Now let me just quickly show you. We can add a justify items center if we want, hit save, and that's going to align everything horizontally. Okay. We can add end, that's going to put it to the end. We can add start, that's going to put it to the start, and by default we have stretch. There we go, perfectly normal. So let's add center here again. Okay, and now let's see, we want it to be aligned vertically. We can just add align items center. There we go. Okay, now let me get rid of this for now. If we don't want to do this, I'm just gonna get rid of these. All right, we're back to the start. We can also mess around with individual items. So again, if we add it here, it affects all the items, but maybe I just want to affect one. So how can I affect only one? Well, we can go on the children of each individual box. So on box 1, I can add align self. If we add center to this, as you can see, it's gonna align it vertically center. Perfect, so we can also add end, and all the other things, it's gonna work the same way. But this way, we only affect one specific grid area. And why am I speaking like this? I have no idea. So we have align self, and we also have justify self center. This is gonna work the same way, but horizontally. All right, so this is pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, again, I really like to do this if I have more content here. So maybe I have a H1 here and maybe a paragraph, hello there, or maybe something more complex. I just like to have these boxes kind of create the layout I want, and then just add display flex here again. And then I can just mess around with this however I want. Justify content, space around, and we can align items center, and we can just kind of adjust these however we want. So this works so well with Flexbox. So I highly recommend you to use both. All right, so that's it for this one. Let's take a look at creating an image gallery that's responsive. Okay, so for the image gallery, I just added a gallery div and a bunch of images in here. Perfect, so we can go to style.css, we can get that gallery, and we can add a display grid on top. Now, if we take a look here, let me just enable it. This is what we have so far. Now, these images are quite large, so we're gonna make them a bit smaller. We can go here and we can add a grid template columns. Now let's make, I want to have, let's say 3 columns. So I can add 300 pixels, 300 pixels, and 300 pixels. Hit save, and now as you can see, we have 3 columns. Now the problem is that this kind of overflows. It kind of goes outside of the column. So all these images go out. To fix that, we can get the gallery images, and we can just add a width of 100%. And that way it's gonna take up all the space of that individual grid. All right, so there we go. Now we have all the images stuck in here. Perfect, and again, all the additional content will just flow down here. Perfect, so that's what we have. And another cool thing we can do is, rather than defining it like so, 300 pixels, 300 pixels, 300 pixels, we can add a repeat. And here we can define how many columns we want to have. So let's say I want to have 3, and then I add a comma, and then I define the value. So I want to have 200 pixels. So I want 3 200 pixel columns. Hit save. Now, as you can see, we have 3 200 pixel columns. Perfect. Very nice. All right, but I want these bigger, so I want 300. There we go, way better. And now one additional thing that we have, as you can see, if I make this kind of smaller and bigger, nothing really happens. It's not really responsive. So the way we can make this responsive is, rather than adding 3 here, we can add something called autofill. Autofill, like so. And what this means is we let CSS Grid kind of figure out the amount of space we have and how many it can take. So it's like, you don't define 3 columns, you just let CSS Grid define how many it can fit. And as you can see, CSS Grid was like, hey, you know what? We don't need 3. I have extra space here. I can add 4, as you can see right there. Now, the beautiful thing is, If we make this smaller now, it's gonna say, hey, I don't have space there anymore, so I'm just gonna go down here. So as you can see, if we make it smaller and smaller, it's just gonna end up being responsive, which is very, very cool. Let me show you something interesting. If I just make this a bit smaller, like 200 pixels, hit save, and if I turn on the grid again, as you can see, autofill still generates us additional columns as soon as it has space, even though we don't necessarily have content in them. So it still generates these empty columns for us, and as soon as they don't have space anymore, they disappear, and then they start jumping down. Now, if you don't want these empty spaces here, you can use something called auto fit. And it's just not going to generate extra columns, basically. That's all it does. And we're probably going to use this more often than autofill. Okay, but I just wanted to let you know that that exists as well. Now let's make this even better. Let's make it very cool and responsive. So I want this to be 300 pixels. All right, so we have two layers here, 2 rows, I should say. And here's a cool thing we can do. Rather than having a set of 300 pixels here, what we can do is we can add something called min-max. And what min-max is going to let us do, it's going to let us define a minimum value a picture should have. So I want it to be at least minimum of 300 pixels. But as soon as it has more space, I want it to take up whatever value I want. So we can add 300 pixels to be the minimum, and then I can define another one that should be a maximum value. And for that, I want 1 FR. Hit save, and now if we take a look, well, everything goes crazy because I need to add a comma in between these two. Hit save, and now as you can see, we have 3 columns, but if I size this smaller, as soon as it doesn't have that 300 pixels anymore, it's gonna jump down and it's gonna be responsive. If I go another one down, as soon as it doesn't have 300 pixels again, it's gonna go all in one row, like so, with 1 FR. So as you can see, it's on 1 FR now. So that's very cool, and you can create some very cool responsive galleries with this. All right. If I want this, I can make it bigger, so I can add a 400 if I want. Now I have a 2-column layout here. As soon as I have more space than 400, it's gonna jump up to 3, and you can kind of mess around with this and have a very cool responsive image gallery. Now, another few tools that you might use, just to cover it very quickly, we can add something called a grid column gap, and that's just gonna add a gap in between the columns. So if I want to add like 20 pixels, now as you can see, we have 20 pixels in between the columns. And we can also add that to the row. We can add grid column row, like so, and we can just add 20 pixels here as well. I think it's rows. I'm messing this up. It's not working. Grid column. I'm just gonna look here to make sure. Grid column. No, it's grid row gap. I apologize. Not grid column. Oh my goodness. All right, 20 pixels. There we go. Save. And as you can see, we also have space in between there. So when we go smaller, we maintain that space. That's it for me today, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know how it goes with grid. I love grid. It's very fun. And come up with some wacky designs. I want to see your wacky designs because that's what actually grid was made for. If you take a look in the documentation, it's for crazy people with wacky designs. I'm joking, and I'm gonna go sleep. All right, everybody. Have a great day.